2024 is the year that the world changes. We are sitting on the edge of a cliff, waiting for World War III to start. The entire world is going at each other's throats. We're at each other's throats in the United States. Quite clearly, we are on the verge of an economic collapse. I can't even believe the things that have changed since the 90s when I was a child to now. 2024 is the year that I think we get into the Third World War. And unfortunately, the chess players who are starting the game are forcing us in that direction. We can see it with Venezuela, with Russia, with Iran and Palestine. It's absolutely insane the things that they are doing. Economically, we are already in a war because of BRICS. The fact that the United States is having to fight to grasp what little is left of our empire, basically, is what to call it, because we had a financial empire. The United States is losing its place. Just as in Ray Dalio's book, The Changing of World Orders, we are literally looking at the end of what was probably the greatest country on the face of the earth. Now, there are many things that have caused that, but in this episode, we're going to entirely focus on the one thing that is going to cause the most damage and destruction to everyone, and that is World War III. Now, we have to start from the beginning. China. China is the master at the chess table. They are the ones moving all the pieces, causing all the problems, because they are the only nation that can truly stand up to the US and the West's might. China is forcing other countries to actually act in their best interest. We can see it with Russia, the partnership with BRICS, forcing Russia to take action against NATO. We can see it in the Middle East, with Palestine, with Iran, paying money directly that is donated from the United States, going straight to the Palestinians to cause a war on that front. We can see it in South America, with Venezuela now invading over oil. Who owns the majority of all these locations? China. China is funding all of this provocation, all of these third-party actors. It is a proxy war. And that is how the world wars always started, is proxy wars. But what is the most evident is the fact that China has a certain number of categories that specifically apply to its country. And those categories are very simple. One, they have an excess male population. Whenever a country has an excess male population, there's a limitation on the number of women who are available. Whenever those excess males start to get angry because they don't have access to their natural reproductive systems, they're going to rebel. What's the next thing to do if you're a dictatorship, communist dictatorship, trying to control your country? Send your excess males to war. And that's what we're seeing all over the globe. They are sending their excess males to be slaughtered because they can't have them in the country, because that leads to civil war. So unfortunately, that leaves us with one option: major scale global wars. Absolutely the worst case scenario that we could possibly have. Now, initially, I thought that this was going to be a Russia-China joint operation at the same time, and this was back when Russia initially invaded, due to the seasonal changes and the ability for terrain to be moved across. But now I've changed my course of action to include the fact that China owns these other countries and is trying to weaken the United States by 1,000 paper cuts. They are cutting us until we bleed, and then just letting us bleed out, because we can only perform so many things. We only have so much industry because we exported all of our industry. And that means one very simple thing: we have to turn all that industry back on, and that gives China the opportunity to do their invasion, to get rid of those excess males. Now, there are multiple other countries that have the same situation, such as India. Russia had plenty of excess males. Now they're a little bit more limited. Venezuela, more than likely, excess males, because most of the immigrants coming up were females. So now there's a bunch of excess males running around the streets. The government has to get rid of those males. We're going to see this all across the world, where the excess males are just being sent out to be slaughtered so that we can even the populations. There are multiple things that cause that, and we'll get into those in the later sessions. Now, Russia. Russia is the next on our list. Although they are acting in coordination with China, no doubt in my mind. They are doing it for resources and land. And it was the fact that NATO was knocking on their doorstep that caused them to actually cross the border and invade in Zapad. Right after the Zapad operation, which they left troops and everyone knew it was going to happen. But it's because we've been nickeling and diming them every single time, moving NATO closer and closer to their borders and almost allowing Ukraine to join was the precipice that Russia could not possibly allow to happen. That's when they invaded. That's why we're in this war. That's why Russia is depleting our actual resources so that China has a better fight. So where's the next step? Well, the next step is easy. The next player is Iran. Iran, unfortunately, is completely being given diplomatic funds directly from us, where they are directly funneling out to all these individual terrorist entities that are causing and wreaking havoc all across the world. It is quite literally US dollars that are paying to destroy these other nations, that are funding the terrorists, that are causing the bloodshed. And again, it goes back to the whole excess mail situation. Unfortunately, innocent people are going to die because of greed and envy. And envy is the nastiest color. Russia's envy overwhelmed their ability to be peaceful, their ability to maintain economic diplomacy. They were so envious of the old state of the USSR and the power that it held that they had to retake it. And it was pride of certain individuals in charge that led them to cause the invasion. Pride on NATO's side, pushing and pushing and pushing until the animal was backed into a corner. Russia lives and breathes on pride. The envy that they had was just a cornerstone. Iran lives and breathes on envy and pride. They're envious of the technologies. They're envious of the economies. They're envious of the way that the world is ran, who runs the world, and why they can't have a piece of it. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of envy all around the world. And that brings us to Venezuela. Venezuela is invading over oil resources that China needs. China is the one pushing this pawn into this war to get a war closer to the United States doorstep. They are quite literally trying to force a war on our southern borders, which they are already invading en masse. Most of the illegal immigrants coming across the southern borders are military-age males. Tell me that is not a pre-invasion. Tell me that is not an operation. There's nothing that can convince me that is not a military operation. They are sending exactly who they need to topple local governments, the federal governments, and every single entity inside of the United States. They are sending people young enough to cause the problems, young enough to transport, young enough to have the knowledge to cause massive damage inside of the United States. This is not to hate the Chinese people, because most of them are just like us. Most of them are just dealing with a communist government, a government that does not care for them, a government that could give a shit less. And that is why Venezuela is doing their actions, because China needs cover. China needs Venezuela to get that oil because they need the oil to be able to finance their war that China's about to start. They need that war to finance the industry because they do not have the ability to self-sustain. We're seeing this inside of China's economy right now. It is absolutely terrifying, everything that they're doing inside of the States. And unfortunately, I think that we're headed in a trajectory towards World War III. There's nothing that we can do because we have weak leadership inside the United States. The West is weak. We're unwilling to change opinions that are nonsensical. We are unwilling to strengthen ourselves and fight back until we're absolutely forced to. And that is why we will be in World War III. And that is why 2024 is the year that the world will change. But it's not just physical war. We are looking at economic warfare that we have already been going through. And the United States is about to see the worst recession we have ever had on the books, if not the next Great Depression. It is literally caused by our weak leadership, our horribly weak leadership. And yes, I am no longer in the active duty, so I can have these opinions. Does it affect my clearance? Potentially. But somebody has to say it. The weak leadership is going to cause the United States to cease being the United States. And if it doesn't cause World War III, it'll cause the next civil war. They are pushing us to this trajectory. We're not going to be able to withstand it. And the thing is, they are pulling us apart as a people so that they can better try to manipulate and control us. So, in the next episode, we'll be talking about the economy and everything they're doing to try and weaken the average middle class citizen as well as reduce the lower class citizen into what they want: new slavery.